Hello. Everything seemed perfect on the surface. Emily and I had been married for 9 years, and we had 2 beautiful kids, Sophia, who just turned 8, and little Noah, who was 5. We had the kind of marriage people envy. At least, that's what everyone thought. We had a nice house in the suburbs, good jobs, and we'd even managed to squeeze in a few date nights, despite the chaos that comes with having young kids. But recently, something felt off. At first, I brushed it off as stress. Emily had just started a new job, one she was really excited about, and I figured the long hours and new responsibilities were taking their toll. She'd come home later than usual, always with some story about meetings running over or getting stuck in traffic. I wanted to believe her, I really did. But there was a nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach that something wasn't right. The changes were subtle at first. She started dressing up more for work, putting on makeup and wearing perfume like she did when we first started dating. Then she started going out for girls' nights more frequently, which wasn't like her at all. Emily had never been the social butterfly. She preferred cozy nights in with a good book or a movie. But suddenly, she had all these new friends from work, and every other weekend, she was out with them until late. The first time she came home drunk, I didn't think much of it. But when it became a pattern, I started to worry. I confronted her once, jokingly, about how she was suddenly so popular. She laughed it off, calling me paranoid, and then she kissed me and told me I had nothing to worry about. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But there was a distance growing between us, one I couldn't ignore. She stopped initiating intimacy, claiming she was too tired or had a headache, and our conversations became shorter, more strained. She was always on her phone, and when I'd ask who she was texting, she'd say it was just work stuff. But the final straw was the night she came home from one of these supposed girls' nights, with a smile on her face that I hadn't seen in a long time, a smile that wasn't for me. That was when I knew I had to find out the truth. Little did she know, her joyful return would soon be met with a devastating surprise. The night that changed everything started like any other. Emily had left for another one of her so-called girls' nights, wearing a dress that was a little too short for just drinks with friends and a scent that lingered in the air long after she was gone. I tried to keep my mind busy, distracting myself with a movie and putting the kids to bed, but the unease gnawed at me. By the time midnight rolled around and she still hadn't come home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I tried calling her, but she didn't pick up. Texts went unanswered. As I sat in the dark living room, my mind raced with 100 different scenarios, each worse than the last. Was she hurt? In trouble? Or was she with someone else? Then, almost as if on cue, her phone buzzed on the couch next to me. She must have forgotten it in her rush to leave. My heart pounded in my chest as I picked it up. The screen lit up with a message from someone named D. The message read, "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible." My hands shook as I unlocked her phone, something I'd never felt the need to do before. It didn't take long to find what I feared. There were dozens of messages, pictures, and even videos exchanged between Emily and this D. They weren't just casual texts. These were full of passion, longing, and a kind of intimacy she hadn't shown me in years. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Emily was cheating on me. Not just a one-time fling, but a full-blown affair. The realization felt like a knife twisting in my gut. How long had this been going on? How many of those nights out with friends were actually nights with him? I scrolled through the messages, unable to stop myself. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. You don't want to see it, but you can't look away. They talked about meeting up at hotels, sneaking around behind my back, and even making plans for future getaways. There were photos of them together, their smiles wide, their bodies close. Each image burned into my brain, a painful reminder of how blind I'd been. But the worst part was realizing how happy she looked in those photos. happier than I'd seen her in years, happier than she'd ever been with me. I felt like a fool, sitting there in the darkness, holding the evidence of my wife's betrayal in my hands. My initial shock quickly turned to anger. How could she do this to me, to our family? I wanted to confront her right then and there, but I knew I needed to be smart about this. If she was willing to lie and cheat, what else was she capable of? I needed a plan, something that would make her feel the same pain she'd inflicted on me. So, I put her phone down and started to prepare. If she thought she could just come home, slip into bed, and continue this charade, she had another thing coming. As the night stretched on, my anger only grew stronger. Every minute that passed with her out, likely with him, fueled my determination. I wasn't just going to confront Emily, I was going to make her feel the full weight of her betrayal. But I needed to be methodical. If I confronted her without a plan, she might twist things around, lie her way out, or even make me look like the bad guy. I had to be smarter than that. First, I gathered everything I needed. The messages, the photos, the hotel receipts she had foolishly saved in a hidden folder on her phone. I forwarded all of it to my email, creating a digital dossier of her affair. This was my insurance policy, proof that I wasn't just being paranoid or irrational. Once I had everything saved, I put her phone back exactly where I found it, as if nothing had happened. Next, I focused on the kids. Sophia and Noah were innocent in all of this, and the last thing I wanted was for them to be caught in the middle. I knew that when Emily came home, she'd expect to find them sleeping in their beds, just like every other night. But not this time. I quietly packed their bags with enough clothes and essentials for a few days, just in case. Then I called my sister, Jessica, who lived about an hour away. Jessica answered on the second ring, her voice groggy but concerned. "Mike, what's going on? It's late." I kept my voice steady, not wanting to alarm her too much. "Jess, I need a favor. Can you take the kids for a few days? I'll explain everything when I get there, but it's important." She didn't ask questions, just agreed right away. That's how she was, always there when I needed her, no matter what. I knew I could trust her to keep Sophia and Noah safe while I dealt with the mess Emily had made. Once I had everything packed, and the kids still fast asleep in the car, I drove to Jessica's house. The hour-long drive was torturous, every mile filled with the searing pain of betrayal. But I had to keep it together for Sophia and Noah. When we arrived, Jessica was waiting at the door, her eyes filled with worry. I managed a weak smile as I carried the kids inside, tucking them into the guest room bed without waking them. Jessica offered me a cup of coffee, but I declined, my mind too full to sit and talk. "Thanks, Jess. I'll call you tomorrow and explain everything." She nodded, sensing the gravity of the situation. "Take care of yourself, Mike. And whatever it is, you know you can count on me." I left her house with a heavy heart, knowing that my life was about to change forever. But there was no turning back now. I drove home, my thoughts racing as I finalized the next step in my plan. When I returned, the house was dark and empty, just as I had left it. I sat in the living room, waiting. The minutes dragged by, each one intensifying the knot in my stomach. Then, finally, around 2 a.m., I heard the sound of her car pulling into the driveway. My heart pounded in my chest as I listened to her fumble with her keys, unaware of the storm she was about to walk into. Emily walked through the door, still wearing that smile, clearly thinking she had pulled off another night of deception. But as soon as she stepped inside, her expression changed. The house was eerily quiet. No kids' toys scattered around, no TV playing in the background. Just silence. "Mike?" she called out, her voice laced with confusion. I stepped out of the shadows, meeting her gaze with a cold, hard stare. "The kids aren't here, Emily. They're with my sister." Her face drained of color, the realization beginning to set in, but she still tried to play it cool, laughing nervously. "What do you mean? Why would you take them to Jess's so late?" I didn't answer right away. I let the silence hang in the air, heavy and foreboding. Because I know Emily. I know everything. Her eyes widened in shock, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear cross her face. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. This was just the beginning. Emily stood there, frozen, as if she couldn't process what was happening. Her eyes darted around the room, probably searching for a way out of this. But there was no escape. Not this time. What do you mean? You know everything? She stammered, her voice shaky. It was the first time I had seen her at a loss for words in years. Normally, she was the confident one, the one who always had an answer, an excuse, a way to make everything seem fine. But not now. I didn't bother to respond. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened my email, and handed it to her. "Read it. Go ahead." She took the phone with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the screen. I watched as her face shifted from confusion to shock, and finally to horror. The color drained from her cheeks as she scrolled through the messages, the photos, all the proof of her betrayal. She looked like she was about to be sick. "Mike, she began. But I cut her off. "Don't," I said, my voice cold and steady. "Don't even try to lie your way out of this. I know about everything, Emily. The secret meetings, the hotels, all those nights you claimed you were out with the girls. It was all a lie, wasn't it?" She didn't answer, just stared at the floor, her eyes welling up with tears. For a moment, I almost felt a pang of sympathy. But then I remembered the photos of her with him, the way she looked at him with the kind of love I hadn't seen in years. The sympathy vanished, replaced by a burning anger. "Who is he?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Who is this D? How long has this been going on?" Emily finally looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "His name is Daniel," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We met a few months ago at work. It just happened, Mike. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Didn't mean for it to go this far? You've been sneaking around behind my back for months, Emily. Don't you dare try to minimize this. You made a choice, a series of choices to lie to me, to cheat on me, to betray everything we've built together." She collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "I'm so sorry, Mike. I never wanted to hurt you. I don't even know why I did it. I was feeling lost. And Daniel made me feel alive again. But I love you. I do. Stop," I said sharply, cutting off her pathetic attempt at an explanation. "You don't get to say you love me after what you've done. Love doesn't destroy people, Emily. Love doesn't lie or cheat or tear a family apart." She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "Please, Mike, let's just talk about this. We can fix it. We can go to counseling, work through it. I'll do anything, just please don't leave me." The desperation in her voice might have moved me if I wasn't so consumed by the betrayal. But all I could think about was how easily she had deceived me, how she had come home from being with another man and kissed our kids goodnight as if nothing had happened. "There's no we anymore, Emily," I said, my voice cold and final. "You made sure of that. And as for the kids, they're not coming back until I figure out what's next. I won't let them be around this mess you've created." She sobbed, clutching at her hair, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I had spent years loving this woman, building a life with her, only to have it all torn apart because she needed to feel alive again. Her excuses, her tears, they didn't matter anymore. The damage was done, and there was no coming back from this. I walked past her to the front door, grabbing my keys. "I'm leaving for now. You can stay here tonight, but tomorrow, I want you out. I'll talk to a lawyer and figure out how to handle this, but don't expect me to make it easy for you." "Mike, please," she started, but I didn't let her finish. I opened the door and stepped out into the night, her cries echoing in my ears. But I didn't look back. I couldn't. The woman I had loved, the mother of my children, had turned into a stranger before my eyes. And now, I had to figure out how to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. I drove aimlessly through the dark streets, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. The shock, anger, and pain coursing through me made it hard to think straight. I had spent the last 9 years building a life with Emily, a life I thought was solid and secure. And now, in the span of a few hours, it had all been ripped away from me. After what felt like hours, I pulled into a quiet parking lot by the lake where Emily and I used to go on dates before we had kids. It was a place filled with memories of late-night talks, shared dreams, and the early days when we couldn't keep our hands off each other. Now, those memories felt like a cruel joke, mocking the man who thought he had it all. I sat there in the car, staring out at the water, trying to make sense of it all. The questions kept swirling in my mind. Why had she done it? Was it something I did or didn't do? Could I have prevented this? But no matter how many times I turned it over in my head, I couldn't find an answer that made any of it hurt less. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through old photos, pictures of us as a family, of Emily smiling, holding our kids, of vacations and holidays that seemed so perfect at the time. I couldn't reconcile those images with the person she had become, the woman who had looked me in the eyes and lied over and over again. The enormity of it all hit me like a freight train, and for the first time that night, I let the tears come. I cried for the love I thought we had, for the trust that had been shattered, for the future I had envisioned for us that was now nothing but ashes. I wasn't just grieving the loss of my marriage. I was mourning the death of a dream. But amidst the tears, a new feeling started to emerge, a sense of clarity. As much as it hurt, I knew that I had to move forward. I couldn't stay stuck in this place of pain and betrayal. Emily had made her choices, and now I had to make mine. For the sake of my kids, and for my own sanity, I needed to take control of the situation. With that thought in mind, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Emily's actions define me or dictate the rest of my life. I wasn't going to let her betrayal destroy me. I had to be strong for Sophia and Noah. They needed me now more than ever, and I couldn't afford to fall apart. I wiped my eyes and took a deep breath, feeling a strange sense of resolve settling in. It wasn't going to be easy, and I knew there would be more hard days ahead. But I had to keep going. I had to pick up the pieces, not just for myself, but for the future I still wanted to build. The first step was to get legal advice. I needed to know my rights, especially when it came to the kids. As much as I hated the idea of a divorce, I couldn't stay in a marriage built on lies. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew I had to protect my children from the fallout of Emily's decisions. The next morning, after a sleepless night in the car, I called a divorce attorney. The receptionist scheduled me for a consultation the next day. Just making that call felt like a small victory, a step toward reclaiming my life from the wreckage. I also reached out to my boss, explaining that I needed some time off to deal with a personal matter. He was understanding and told me to take as much time as I needed. It was a relief, knowing that I wouldn't have to juggle work on top of everything else. After handling those practicalities, I drove back to my sister's house. When I walked in, Sophia and Noah were playing in the living room, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in their parents' lives. Jessica looked up from the kitchen table, concern etched on her face. "Mike, what's going on? You look like hell," she said, her voice gentle but insistent. I sat down across from her, feeling the weight of everything I needed to explain. "Jess, it's bad. Emily's been cheating on me for months." Her eyes widened in shock, and she reached out to grab my hand. "Oh my God, Mike, I'm so sorry." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I'm seeing a lawyer tomorrow. I needed to get the kids away from the house. I can't trust her, Jess. Not after everything. She squeezed my hand tightly. You're doing the right thing, Mike. You need to protect yourself and the kids. And you know I'm here for whatever you need. For the first time since I'd discovered the affair, I felt a tiny flicker of hope. I wasn't alone in this. I had support, and I had a plan. The road ahead was going to be tough, but I was determined to come out the other side stronger. As I sat there watching my children play, I realized that while my marriage might be over, my life wasn't. I still had a future to build, even if it wasn't the one I had originally planned. And I was going to fight like hell to make sure that future was a good one, for me and for my kids. The next day, I woke up early, the weight of everything still heavy on my chest. Jessica had let me sleep in her guest room while the kids were blissfully unaware of the chaos their lives were about to descend into. I barely got any sleep, my mind racing with thoughts of Emily, of what she was doing, of how we had gotten to this point. But as the sun crept through the blinds, I knew I had to keep moving forward. There was no time to dwell on the past. I had to face what was coming head on. I left the kids with Jessica and drove to the attorney's office, feeling a mix of anxiety and determination. Walking into that office felt surreal, like I was stepping into a different life, one that I never imagined for myself. But here I was, about to discuss divorce, custody, and all the ugly details that come with unraveling a marriage. The attorney, Mr. Bennett, was a seasoned professional with a no-nonsense attitude. He listened intently as I laid out everything I knew, Emily's affair, the evidence I had collected, and my concerns about the kids. As I spoke, he took notes, occasionally nodding or asking for clarification. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. Mike, I'm going to be honest with you, this isn't going to be easy, but the fact that you've gathered evidence of the affair puts you in a stronger position, especially when it comes to custody. The court doesn't look kindly on infidelity, particularly when it affects the stability of the children's home life. I nodded, feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. At least Emily's betrayal wouldn't go unnoticed. What do I need to do next? We'll start by filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery, Mr. Bennett said, his tone matter of fact. We'll also request temporary custody of the children, given the circumstances. If Emily tries to fight for full custody, we'll use the evidence to argue that her actions have compromised her ability to provide a stable environment for them. Hearing it laid out so plainly made it all feel more real. This was happening. There was no turning back now. What about the house? The finances? We'll need to go over the details of your assets and debts, Mr. Bennett explained. But generally, the courts aim to divide things equitably. Since you have proof of her infidelity, that could work in your favor during the division of property and any spousal support discussions. I sat there, absorbing everything he was saying, feeling both numb and angry. This was the reality of it. My life was being reduced to legal terms and negotiations. But there was one thing I cared about more than anything else. My kids, Mr. Bennett. I can't let her have them after what she's done. He nodded, his gaze steady. We'll fight for that, Mike. But I need you to be prepared for a battle. Emily may not give up easily, especially if she feels cornered. The thought of it turned my stomach, but I knew he was right. Emily had always been stubborn, and if she felt like she was losing control, she might lash out. But I was ready for it. I had to be. After finalizing the details with Mr. Bennett, I left his office feeling a strange mixture of relief and dread. The legal wheels were in motion, but there was still so much to face. I wasn't just dealing with the end of a marriage. I was gearing up for a fight, one that could drag on for months or even years. On the drive back to Jessica's, my mind wandered back to the night before, to Emily's tearful pleas. Part of me wondered if there was more to her story, if there was some explanation that could make this hurt less. But then I remembered the messages, the photos, the cold reality of her betrayal. She had made her choices, and now she had to face the consequences. When I got back to Jessica's, the kids were playing in the backyard, completely unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface of their lives. I stood there for a moment, watching them, feeling the weight of what I had to do next. I needed to tell them something, to prepare them for the changes that were coming. But how could I explain something so complicated and painful to them? Before I could figure out what to say, Jessica came out holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to me and gave me a concerned look. "How did it go?" "About as well as it could, I guess," I replied, taking a sip of the coffee. "We're filing for divorce. Mr. Bennett thinks I have a good case for custody, but it's going to be a fight." Jessica nodded, her expression sad but supportive. "You're doing the right thing, Mike. The kids need you. They need stability, especially now." I sighed, feeling the weight of that responsibility. "Yeah, I know. But how do I tell them? How do I explain that their mom and I aren't going to be together anymore?" She put a hand on my shoulder, her eyes filled with empathy. "You just have to be honest with them in a way they can understand. They're smart, Mike. They'll know something's wrong. It's better they hear it from you than figure it out on their own." She was right, of course. But the thought of sitting down with Sophia and Noah, of seeing the confusion and hurt in their eyes, made my heart ache. They didn't deserve this. They deserved a happy home, a mom and dad who loved each other and worked together to give them the best life possible. But that wasn't our reality anymore. I spent the rest of the afternoon playing with the kids, trying to soak up the last moments of their innocence before it was shattered by the truth. Every time they laughed, it felt like a small dagger to my heart, knowing that their world was about to change forever. That evening after dinner, I sat them down in the living room, Jessica by my side for support. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "Sophia, Noah," I began, my voice gentle but steady. "I need to talk to you about something important." They looked up at me with those big, trusting eyes, and I had to fight back the tears threatening to spill over. "Your mom and we're going to be living in different houses for a while. We both love you very much, and nothing will ever change that. But sometimes moms and dads need some time apart to figure things out." Sophia frowned, her little brows furrowing in confusion. "Why, Daddy? Did we do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart," I said quickly, pulling her into my arms. "You didn't do anything wrong. This isn't your fault, okay? Your mom and I just need to work on some things, but no matter what happens, we both love you more than anything." Noah, still too young to fully grasp what was happening, just snuggled into my side, his small hand clutching my shirt. I held them both close, feeling their warmth and innocence, and silently promised myself that I would protect them from as much of the fallout as possible. As I tucked them into bed that night, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the journey ahead. Emily's betrayal had shattered the life I thought we had, but I wasn't going to let it break me. I wasn't going to let it define our future. For the sake of Sophia and Noah, I would face whatever came next with strength and determination. They deserved a father who could give them the stability and love they needed, even if everything else was falling apart, and I was going to be that father no matter what it took. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings, phone calls, and emotionally charged moments. Emily had been staying at a friend's house since that night, giving us both some space. We communicated only when absolutely necessary, mostly about the kids. Every interaction was strained, filled with tension and unspoken words. I tried to keep things as normal as possible for Sophia and Noah. Jessica had been a rock, helping me navigate the day-to-day, but I could see the toll it was taking on her too. She had her own family to worry about, yet here she was, stepping in to help clean up the mess Emily had made. It wasn't long before Emily demanded to see the kids. At first, I refused. I couldn't bear the thought of her trying to spin some story, trying to cover up the damage she'd done. but Mr. Bennett advised me to allow it. "If this goes to court," he said, "it'll look better if you've been cooperative. You want to show that you're putting the kids' needs first, despite everything." Reluctantly, I agreed to let her visit them at Jessica's house, but only if I was there too. Emily tried to argue, saying it would confuse the kids to see us together, but I stood firm. I wasn't ready to trust her alone with them, not after all the lies. When Emily showed up, she looked like a shadow of the woman I used to know. Her once confident demeanor was gone, replaced by a nervous energy that made her seem small and uncertain. It was clear she was struggling with the reality of the situation, but I couldn't afford to feel sympathy for her. Not now. Not when I was still picking up the pieces of my shattered life. The kids ran to her, wrapping their arms around her legs, their faces lighting up with joy. I watched from a distance, my heart heavy. Despite everything, they still loved her unconditionally. They didn't understand the complexities of adult relationships, nor should they have to. To them, she was still mommy, and that was all that mattered. "Hi, sweethearts," she said, her voice trembling slightly as she hugged them close. "I've missed you so much." Sophia looked up at her with wide eyes. "Mommy, are you and Daddy going to be friends again soon?" Emily's face crumpled for a moment, but she quickly composed herself. "We're working on things, baby. But no matter what, we both love you very much. You know that, right?" Noah, still too young to grasp the gravity of the situation, just nodded and clung to her. I watched the scene unfold, my emotions a tangled mess. I wanted to shield them from the truth, but I knew that eventually they'd have to know more. But today wasn't that day. After a while, Emily and I exchanged awkward glances, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. I could see she was struggling to find the words, maybe even to apologize, but I wasn't ready to hear it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The visit ended without any major incidents, which was a relief. But as soon as Emily left, the kids bombarded me with questions I wasn't prepared to answer. "Daddy, why isn't Mommy coming home with us?" Sophia asked, her voice tinged with confusion and a bit of fear. I knelt down to her level, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mommy and I need some time to figure things out, sweetie, but she'll see you again soon. You're going to spend time with both of us, okay?" Sophia nodded, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. Noah just looked at me, his little face scrunched up in confusion, but he didn't say anything. It broke my heart to see them like this, caught in the middle of something they couldn't understand. Later that evening, after the kids were asleep, I sat in the quiet of Jessica's living room, nursing a glass of whiskey and staring blankly at the TV. The sound was on, but I wasn't really listening. My mind kept replaying the events of the past few weeks, trying to make sense of it all. How had we gotten here? How had Emily, the woman I had loved and trusted, turned into someone I barely recognized? I kept coming back to those messages, the photos, the evidence of her betrayal. Each time, it cut deeper, like the wound would never fully heal. My phone buzzed, breaking me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Emily. "Mike, can we talk? Not about the kids, but about us? I know you don't want to hear it, but I owe you an explanation. Please." I stared at the message, feeling a mix of anger and curiosity. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to shut her out completely. But another part of me, the part that needed closure, couldn't resist the pull to finally hear what she had to say. I took a deep breath and typed a reply. "Fine. Tomorrow. I'll come by the house in the afternoon." Her response was almost immediate. "Thank you." The next day, I drove back to the house. The place that used to be our home, now just a reminder of what was lost. Walking through the front door felt strange, like stepping into a life that wasn't mine anymore. The house was eerily quiet, the absence of the kids' laughter making it feel even more hollow. Emily was waiting in the living room, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen her. She had a glass of wine in her hand, but it didn't seem to be calming her nerves. "Mike," she started, her voice shaking slightly. "Thank you for coming." I didn't respond, just nodded for her to continue. I wasn't here for pleasantries. She took a deep breath and began. "I know you don't want to hear excuses, and I'm not here to give you any. What I did was wrong, unforgivable even. I know that. But I need you to understand." "Understand what, Emily?" I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. "That you needed something more? That I wasn't enough? Because that's what it feels like. You were off living some fantasy while I was here trying to make things work." She winced, the guilt clear on her face. "It wasn't about you not being enough, Mike. It was about me. I've been lost. I felt like I was drowning in the routine of our lives. Work, kids, the same thing every day. And then I met Daniel, and he made me feel like I mattered again. Like I was more than just a wife and a mother." I clenched my fists, trying to control the anger bubbling up inside me. "So you decided to throw away our marriage, our family, because you needed to feel important?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. "I know it sounds selfish, and maybe it is, but I never wanted it to go this far. I thought I could keep it separate, that it wouldn't affect what we had. But I was wrong." I laughed bitterly. "You think? You didn't just affect what we had, Emily. You destroyed it. There's no going back from this." She nodded, tears now streaming down her face. "I know. And I'm sorry, Mike. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. I needed you to know how sorry I am." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. I had come here looking for answers, for some kind of closure. But now that I had it, all I felt was emptiness. There was no explanation that could make this hurt any less. No apology that could undo the damage. After what felt like an eternity, I finally spoke. "You got what you wanted, Emily. You got to feel alive again. But at what cost? You've lost everything." She nodded, her face a mask of regret. "I know, and I'm going to have to live with that for the rest of my life." I stood up, the finality of it all settling in. "I'm done, Emily. I don't want to hear any more excuses or apologies. The only thing we need to talk about from now on is the kids. They're the only thing that matters now." She didn't try to stop me as I walked out the door. As I drove away from the house that was no longer a home, I realized that for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a strange sense of relief. The truth was out, the lies exposed, and the door to that chapter of my life was finally closing. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be more pain to come. But I knew one thing for sure. I was done letting Emily's choices dictate my life. From here on out, I was in control of my own future, and I was going to do everything in my power to make sure that future was a good one. For me and for my kids. Bye-bye.